Congress's first order of business for the new year will be to elect a new speaker this Friday. President-elect Donald Trump threw his support behind current Speaker of the House Mike Johnson yesterday, but it might not be enough. Kentucky Congressman Thomas Massie says he is not voting for Johnson, and several others have also not committed to re-electing Johnson. Joining me now is Sam Stein, managing editor at The Bulwark, Carlos Cabello, former Republican congressman from Florida, and Michael Hardaway, former communications director and spokesman for Congressman Hakeem Jeffries. Welcome, guys. Good to have all of you here. So, Sam, some GOP lawmakers are still holding their support out. They're not saying what they're going to do. But here's what Speaker Johnson said about all that last night.
I think that those members and all of them want to be a part of these solutions. They made big promises to their constituents in this campaign cycle, and we've got to deliver upon them now. It's the media and the left that wants to divide us and distract us. We can't fall into that trap. We've got to stay united.
What do you make of his response there, really making the case for himself?
Well, there's not much more he can do, right? He got the biggest endorsement he needed, which was Donald Trump. And Donald Trump said no, it would have been done. But that doesn't make him in the clear at all. He's got a razor-thin majority. He can stand to lose two, I think, potentially members. And what that does is that incentivizes every Republican member to try to extract some sort of promise or pledge from him, right? If you're going to be the one who could hold him over the barrel, you might as well get something in return. And so Mike Johnson has a difficult path ahead of him. Doesn't mean he can't pull it off. I think the best thing he's going for them is, if not him, who else, right? No one is going to unite this party other than Trump and maybe Elon Musk. And so he's going to be using a mix of sticks and carrots. And in the end, he can only afford to lose one in addition to Tom Massie. So it's going to be tight.
Yeah. And so, Carlos, to that end, I mean, even with Donald Trump's support now, Elon Musk co-signed Trump's endorsement initially, but after Massie said he wouldn't support Johnson for a variety of reasons, Musk then commented, quote, "You might be right, but let's see how it goes." So, look, we know Musk and Trump have become very close, but how much sway do you think Musk is going to have over Congress, either directly or indirectly through Trump?
Well, Alex, I think that was put to the test about 10 days ago when Elon Musk and Donald Trump teamed up to try to bully or intimidate Republicans into passing a suspension of the debt ceiling. And you saw about 40 House Republicans say, well, sorry, we're just not going to do that at this point. So I don't think that this is going to have as much of an impact as people are as much attention as people are giving it. And at the end of the day, the Republicans who are not happy with Mike Johnson, they simply have nowhere else to go. There are no alternate candidates out there. The men who could compete against Johnson, people like Steve Scalise, who's the majority leader, Tom Emmer, who's the majority whip, Jim Jordan, who's a prominent committee chairman, they already tried to become speaker, and they could not get a sufficient number of votes. So really, this is Mike Johnson's race to lose. I think a few of these members, maybe a handful, are going to try to get some concessions, some changes, amendments to the House rules package. We certainly saw that when Kevin McCarthy was trying to become speaker and ultimately did for 8 months. So that's what's going on here.
So, Michael, if they don't have a speaker, let's say by Monday, Congress then won't be able to certify the presidential election. Does that mean Democrats could try to save Johnson to try to just avoid any kind of a messy start to this Congress, or you think that won't happen?
Leader Jeffries has already made clear that he's not planning to step in to save Johnson this time around. I mean, the Republican conference, at some capacity, has to figure out how it's going to operate in this term. To the point that was made earlier, they have a razor-thin majority on every single vote. And so it's not the job of House Democrats to step in and save them from their own chaos. You're not going to see that next term.
What are the chances Hakeem Jeffries could be elected speaker? I mean, come on, Michael. I know those, the other two, you can't see them. They're shaking their head, but...
Well, listen, here's the thing. He would actually work in a bipartisan manner to get things done. I don't think Republicans would vote for him, but if they were smart, they would, because the reality is that outside of Mike Johnson, Republicans don't have a viable candidate for speaker. And so if they take him down for some reason, then they don't really have anyone to step in who's viable for that role.
I mean, unprecedented that would be, but Anyway, Sam, let's take a look at this, because on Friday, Trump posted this pretty random message on Truth Social that the New York Times says was seemingly meant for Musk. Here's what it said, quote, "Where are you? When are you coming to the center of the universe? Mar-a-Lago, Bill Gates asked to come tonight. We miss you and X. New Year's Eve is going to be amazing." So what is your reporting telling you about how Republicans are responding to Trump's seeming reliance on Elon Musk? I mean, the New York Times also reports that he's essentially living at Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, that was a weird post. I'm not going to lie. It felt like it maybe was a DM that he accidentally put in public. You know, we've all been there, I suppose. As for Musk, he clearly has outsized influence over Trump. We saw this a week ago or this past week with the debate over H-1B visas. This is something that Trump has in the past been very clear. He's against the program for high-skilled visas. And because Elon Musk supported it, because Elon Musk took a sharp stance against some conservatives over it, Trump ultimately sided with Elon Musk. And not only that, said he has long been a supporter of the program, which is just factually not true. So clearly Elon Musk is setting out policy. Elon Musk is involved in calls with world leaders. It's an unprecedented amount of power for an unelected person who has no real accountability here because he wasn't voted on for this position. He's going to have a lot of sway over the budget. He's going to have a lot of say over foreign policy, over domestic policy, and he has billions upon billions of government contracts. What I've noticed, which is of interest in the past couple of days, is that some conservatives who are on the other side of that H-1B debate are starting to raise concerns about those conflicts of interest, saying why should we be okay with someone who has this much on the line, this much financial interest at stake, having such proximity to the president. I don't think that's going to spread very far. I think a lot of Republicans really worship Elon and know that he's a huge threat to them politically if he ever turns them and funds their primary opponents. But it's been interesting to watch that happen.
That last point you made, though, Sam, does that help explain why Trump and Musk are so close right now? Do you think it lasts? What could break them up?
Of course, when someone spends $250 million getting you elected and owns one of the biggest social media platforms and boosts you constantly, you feel indebted to him. And not only that, you don't want to piss him off, right? Like, you don't want to anger him. What can make it problematic is if Musk takes too much of the spotlight. You saw Elon Musk say a couple of weeks ago he doesn't want the Time magazine cover person of the year. He thinks it should go to Trump. He's aware of that. Elon Musk is also aware of people trying to push that narrative that he's outshining Trump too. But that would be the thing that
That wouldn't go over well. Quickly to you, Carlos, what have you been hearing about GOP feelings towards Musk and his perceived shadow presidency? I mean, to Sam's point, a lot of people have said, hey, we don't remember voting for Elon Musk.
Yeah, I can tell you that there are a good number of members of Congress who do not like the idea of, for the next 2 to 4 years, having to deal not just with Donald Trump's posts on social media, but also with Elon Musk's. And I do think that Musk is going to overshoot when it comes to Congress. Members of Congress aren't as sensitive to the threats and the kinds of theater that Musk is known for. So I think some of this might go too far and might actually start doing more harm than good.
We will see. Sam, Carlos, Michael, good to see you all. Thank you so much.
Breaking news out of Puerto Rico, where a major blackout has hit nearly the entire island, leaving more than 1.2 million people without power this morning. This on an island that has struggled with persistent power outages stemming from a crumbling electrical grid and severe storms. NBC's George Solis is following the very latest for us. George, what more do we know about this massive outage and what caused it?
Yeah, Yana, good to be with you. As you can imagine, this is not the news that many residents were hoping to wake up to this New Year's Eve. But as you mentioned, yes, almost the entire island of Puerto Rico without power. And what we're learning from officials and voices there on the ground is this appears to be just another infrastructure problem, an underground cable at a power plant on the southern coast there that failed, leading to what is basically a cascading effect and knocking out power to multiple facilities out there, leading to this rampant blackout. Now, Luma Energy, the private company out there controlling most of the power grid, releasing updates every 2 hours. And one of their latest updates that I can share with you, they announced that they are restoring in some areas the power. The medical center, for instance, and the municipal hospital of San Juan are already back on the grid. Culebra, another municipality out there, is in service with some of the other electric partners, and they're providing these updates, as I mentioned, every 2 hours. LUMA has also activated its Emergency Operations Center and is currently working with some of their other energy partners to restart this electrical grid. But of course, as we've seen more often than not when it comes to these power outages, this is not something that is rectified immediately. Sometimes it can take days, if not weeks. It has been a while since we've seen a rampant blackout to this degree, but we all know, as we've reported on this, these power outages have been a rampant problem for Puerto Rico. The island, of course, dealing with a lot of issues related to that old infrastructure there, related, and those storms obviously not helping anything over the course of the years. A lot of frustrations there on the island as well, Anna.
This morning, medical experts are warning about a norovirus outbreak hitting several states. The CDC reports more than 90 cases confirmed in the first week of December alone. That's more than double the cases we've seen that same week over the last 3 years. NBC's Shaquille Brewster is joining us now with more on all of this. So why now? Why are we seeing a big surge, Shaq?
Well, Anna, it's around that time of the year where you're seeing people gather with family and friends. They're sharing food. Just think about how so many people are planning to celebrate the new year tonight. And the problem is we're seeing this clash essentially with a spike in the spread of norovirus. Fortunately, doctors say there are some simple steps that you could take to prevent this from spreading further.
This morning, a holiday health warning as cases of the norovirus surge.
Norovirus decided to be our last little Christmas gift.
New data from the CDC shows an increase in outbreaks, with 91 reported in the first week of December across 14 states, more than double the number for the same week over the past 3 years.
Is there any reason why we're seeing this rise?
Gathering together, especially this time of the year, and all the traveling we're doing, that's causing the increases.
The highly contagious virus, commonly referred to as the stomach flu, can cause days of vomiting, gastrointestinal problems, and fever.
I promise you, you do not want this.
The recent rise comes as multiple states reported new infections in December. In Minnesota, health officials say the number of outbreaks are twice what they usually see. California officials also investigating an outbreak involving 80 people who became ill after eating raw oysters at a Los Angeles food festival. And on 3 different cruise ships operated by Holland America and Princess Cruises, more than 300 passengers contracted the virus. Norovirus can be spread through direct contact with an infected person, touching contaminated surfaces, or eating contaminated food.
If you have been sick with this, I'm sending you all my love because it's no joke.
Now, with millions expected to gather for New Year's Eve celebrations, health experts say it's important to take precautions. Wash produce thoroughly, don't share utensils, and don't rely on hand sanitizer.
You know, we all have this around the house, the hand sanitizer. This does not work very well for norovirus. You need to wash your hands, that 20 seconds we always talk about.
Dr. Torres went on to say that if you are not feeling well, the best thing that you could do tonight is to, unfortunately, just stay home. And remember, with the norovirus, even if you're feeling better, you can still be contagious for up to 2 weeks after those symptoms first appeared. So make sure you keep track of when those symptoms occurred in order to help keep other people safe. As we know, this is a time when it's not just norovirus. You're also talking about COVID, RSV, and flu that's on the rise, Anna.
Boy, sounds pretty miserable. Stay healthy, my friend. Thank you.
Yes, you too.
Joining us now, infectious disease physician and founding director of Boston University Center on Emerging Infectious Diseases, Dr. Nahid Bhadillia. Thank you so much for being here, Doctor. As Shaq just laid out, norovirus isn't new this time of year, but these numbers are pretty staggering, almost double what we've seen in recent years. How do you explain it? Why so much worse this year?
Yeah, Anna, I want to begin by underscoring what Shaquille said, which is that this is highly contagious. I mean, it takes very few viral particles to transmit this, and this kind of runs through like wildfire in communal living spaces and nursing homes and cruises. This is why you're seeing such a rise. And within families, it becomes harder too. So that transmissibility, the contagiousness adds to it. But if I were to guess, I think there are a couple of reasons that I can imagine why. One, there's always a surge in the winter. It's possible that we haven't seen as high a numbers in recent years because we weren't mingling as much for a few years during the pandemic. And, you know, now we've changed our behaviors. Potentially we're not being as vigilant as we should be with washing our hands, disinfecting surfaces. And second, maybe because we haven't had as many outbreaks, potentially we don't have as much immunity to some of the strains that are transmitting. Those are some of the thoughts I could think of, but we don't have a definitive answer, except for the fact that it's very contagious, but very easy to protect yourself if you keep your hands clean and keep the surfaces clean.
I know, we're just seeing all that video, people washing their hands. Any other advice that you can offer people trying to keep their family safe during this surge?
Yeah, I always advise that during winter months, I mean, if you don't have communal food sitting out in offices or buffets and things like that, right, which is really that shared, it's fecal oral route, unfortunately, awful to say, but it's literally don't wash your hands. But if you're sharing, try not to share food, communal food with those outside your family. And as Shaquille mentioned in the report, not sharing utensils is another way to protect yourself as well.
And with the holidays and these big gatherings also comes the added risk of catching COVID or the flu or RSV. What is the latest on those other viruses? Just how bad is it this year?
Yeah, thankfully we're not seeing as high a rate of hospitalization as death because we've gotten and built up immunity over the years and people have been taking the COVID-19 vaccines. But if you want to stay, particularly if you're somebody who's vulnerable or you have someone in your family, everybody over the age of 6 months should be taking a flu and COVID vaccine. If you haven't taken those vaccines yet, there's still time. The flu season is a little delayed this year, but the cases are ramping up, and so you should take it now so you can be protected for the rest of the season. For RSV, if you are someone who's over 75 or someone who's medically vulnerable between 60 to 75, you should have gotten a dose last year. If you didn't, you should get one this year. If you got one last year, you don't need to repeat it this year.
And as far as those vaccines, like the flu vaccine and COVID vaccine, is it safe to get them at the exact same time? And do we know, is the latest COVID vaccine up to date in terms of the most recent strain?
Yeah, good question. You can take the flu and COVID vaccines together, no problem. And the current booster, the current version of the COVID vaccine was formulated last spring, but it still actually gives a lot of coverage for KP.2, which is the strain that's been circulating at the highest rate in this fall. So still worth it. I would take it because it keeps you from getting more severe disease and potentially end up in the hospital.
Dr. Naheed Bhadelia, thank you so much, and Happy New Year to you.
I want to bring in Mark Leibovich, staff writer for The Atlantic and an MSNBC political contributor, and also with us, former Pennsylvania Republican Congressman Charlie Dent. Congressman, I want to start with you. Do you think this vote on Friday is going to get messy?
It certainly has potential to get messy. As you just pointed out, Johnson can only lose one vote. He's already lost one. He can't lose two. And given the unpredictable nature of some of the members of the House Republican Conference, I wouldn't want to go into this vote without fully knowing my vote count. And it strikes me that he should be okay because Trump has endorsed him. But you got a group of wildcats here, and Massey's not going to flip his vote. Sparks, she was against McCarthy at one point during his run for speaker, and who knows what she'll do. And there could be some other surprises. So I'd be a little nervous if I were Johnson, but Trump's endorsement should give him some measure of comfort, but don't count on it.
Mark, I want to turn to you. Speaker Johnson was on Fox News last night and was asked to respond to people like Thomas Massie and Victoria Spartz. Here's what he had to say.
I think that those members and all of them want to be a part of these solutions. They made big promises to their constituents in this campaign cycle, and we've got to deliver upon them now. It's the media and the left that wants to divide us and distract us. We can't fall into that trap. We've got to stay united, and if we do, we can bring about this America First agenda quickly and deliver for the American people so they see results very early in the year.
What's your take on that? Is the division coming from without or within?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's the media in this case. Look, division, distraction, whatever you want to call it. If two Republicans, three Republicans, whatever it is, not a big amount, votes against him, no matter how much loyalty the caucus has collectively to Donald Trump and maybe Elon Musk, although who knows that, we're into chaos. That's what this is. And as we've seen a million times over the last few years, all it takes is a few just to cause all kinds of trouble. And certainly, there's not, I wouldn't say a groundswell of goodwill that Mike Johnson has to sort of fall back on here. But also, as we know, if any number of members of Congress who wants all kinds of attention can decide that he or she is a wild card in the next few days, and then the situation gets even muddier. So, look, I wouldn't feel confident if I were him at all, given the math.
Yeah, and Charlie, I also want to ask you about another complicating factor, and that's Elon Musk. We saw him kind of throw a wrench, or rather a Tesla truck, into this bipartisan budget deal. According to... It seems that he's won over Donald Trump on the question of these specialized immigrant visas, which a lot of, MAGA loyalists don't like. But how wary should lawmakers be about the influence Musk has over some of these bigger issues when it comes to, helping the president and members of Congress decide where they want to go on this stuff?
Well, I really think the big question is watching how MAGA world, I should say the MAGA diehards, and Elon Musk collide. And immigration, H-1B visas, is a classic case. You're probably likely going to see another collision on an issue like trade. These across-the-board tariffs, I suspect, are going to make many of the tech bros, Elon Musk and others, a bit nervous. So that's really what I'm watching for right now. Just what type of pushback. These two worldviews of some of the tech folks and the MAGA world are not compatible, in my view. So we're going to see more conflict as time goes on here.
And Mark, I also want to ask you, Musk has reportedly been camped out at Mar-a-Lago since the election. According to the New York Times, he's been using one of the cottages available for rent on Trump's property, citing two people with knowledge of the arrangement. What do you make of that? And do you think the level of influence Musk is having right now with the president-elect is going to be permanent or temporary?
I mean, if you ask me, I'd say probably temporary, but I mean, temporary is relative. I mean, he can certainly afford whatever he's paying for these, this sort of high-end bungalow or whatever it is. I mean, apparently it costs $2,000 a night. I don't think money's an issue for him. Clearly, it seems like, whatever the bromance, whatever you want to call it, seems to be, going into January. I mean, it's sort of been what we've been hearing about for the last 6 weeks or so. I think there's a lot of wild cards here. I think both of these parties are quite mercurial, meaning both these men are quite mercurial. I think the Republican caucus is. I think the Republican Party is at this point. We'll see what this all looks like, say, in a month, let alone 6 months. But I think right now, yeah, it looks like they're joined. I wouldn't say at the hip, but they're joined in some kind of alliance that seems to be at the head of the Republican Party right now.
Congressman, if you had to put a clock on this particular bromance, or do you see a particular issue that could spell the end of it, what would be your guesses?
Well, I think it's going to it could blow up over immigration, it could blow up over trade. I think I don't know it. I have an exact clock. Maybe Mark is right. I think I don't think this bromance is going to last too terribly long, at least not this close, because you have to remember, MAGA is a populist movement. And many of these leaders in business, like Musk, they are not necessarily popular. And I can see this on trade. Musk has a lot of interest tied up with China. Those across-the-board tariffs are going to cost him money. You see it on the H-1B visas, and there are going to be other visa programs. Business community generally is also going to run into conflict. And we're all waiting to see how this sorts itself out. Who will assert themselves best? It's clear right now that Musk won round one here on the H-1B visas, but this is just round one. And I'm not sure how many more rounds there will be.
All right, we'll have to see how long that temporary lease down there on that cabin lasts. Mark Leibovich, former Congressman Charlie Dent, thank you both so much for joining us.
Joining us now, we have a big panel. Jonathan Allen, senior national politics reporter for NBC News. Aaron Haynes is the 19th editor-at-large and an MSNBC political contributor. Matthew Dowd served as chief strategist for the Bush-Cheney 2004 presidential campaign, also an MSNBC political analyst. And Don Calloway is a Democratic strategist and founder of the National Voter Protection Action Fund. It's good to see all of you. So, Jonathan, you first. The first Trump White House was plagued by consistent staffing turnover and a fair amount of chaos. How challenging will it be for Trump's chief of staff, Susie Wiles, to keep things under control, especially with so many outside influencers in the president-elect's ear?
It's the $64,000 question, Alex, particularly when you look at behind-the-scenes players. So many people in Trump world love to be in the spotlight. Susie Wiles doesn't like to be in the spotlight. One of the things that went very well for Donald Trump's campaign for the presidency this time, that did not go so well last time he ran for the presidency or in the last White House, was that his staff was tremendously disciplined. There was very little drama on that staff. Certainly in any staff environment, you've got, some competition, some jockeying, the occasional, bad vibes. But Susie Wiles was really able to keep that staff together. but it was a leaner staff. Now that Trump is coming into the White House, he will have an entire administration to run, plus the sort of outside orbit, if you will, this constellation of the Elon Musks and the Steve Bannons and the Vivek Ramaswamys and other folks in his ear all the time. This is going to be a huge challenge for her, and I think it will have a significant effect on his ability to to get done what he wants to get done.
Yeah, it's funny, though, when I think about Susie Wiles and your description of her being really low-key, I would apply that to John Kelly as well. It's just my observation. I think he was someone who certainly knew his role in the military, but in this role, I think he did try to stay behind the scenes and wisely cancel the president. So we'll see if Susie can do an even better job at that. You're welcome to disagree with me.
I was just going to say, John Kelly spent his career in the military, and certainly reasons to believe that he's tough, but don't cross Susie Wiles.
I don't intend to. Okay, so Matthew, to you, because on Capitol Hill, the Republican Senate leader no longer is going to be Mitch McConnell. When Congress comes back, we have John Thune of South Dakota, who's going to step into that role. Will Republicans be able to get anything done with slim majorities and a president who drives so much of the party agenda?
I mean, I think that's the big question. I doubt they're going to be able to pass any real legislative fundamental change reform packages in the manner that they want. They could pass some compromise strategies with the Democrats, but they have a 3-vote margin in the House and a 2-3 vote margin in the Senate, and you have people like Susan Collins and the senator from Alaska who are going to basically stop anything bad from happening. So my guess is they're going to figure out pretty early on that passing some fundamental real legislative reform is all but impossible in this. And I think Donald Trump's going to, resort to executive orders or, on the international scale, doing things with or without NATO, doing things with Russia, all of those things he can do sort of on his own as president of the United States. But legislatively, I think it's almost impossible to pass any fundamental reform that I think Republicans want.
Yeah, he used a lot of executive order in the first term as well. So, Aaron, to you now, because black women were such an instrumental part of the 2024 election as a whole. Who are you going to be watching in that space in this coming year?
Well, I mean, Alex, I think you can't have that conversation without talking about Vice President Kamala Harris, who obviously was not successful in her bid for president in November. So what does she do next? Will she be running for governor of California? Will she be thinking about a potential bid for 2028? I think that is just the big outstanding question that a lot of us have. She can certainly reach out to me at any time and answer that, between now and the time that she leaves office or whenever. But, I think, black women generally are really talking to them in the wake of the election and headed into next year. They're regrouping. They're thinking about how they're going to move forward politically in the Democratic Party, whether that's as voters, as organizers, as people running for or in elected office. And so another thing that I'm thinking about, similar to 2016 when we saw Hillary Clinton lose to Donald Trump in that election, you had Hillary Clinton's campaign inspiring other women to run for office in the wake of her defeat. So could we see other black women, other women generally running for office in 2025 and beyond who were inspired by Vice President Harris? And also, we've got this Women's March that is supposed to be coming up, inauguration weekend. Will we see black women joining that effort, that seems to be largely spearheaded by white women? Will they be joining with them in coalition? How does that look? How does that allyship look also going forward?
Don, to Aaron's point of regrouping and moving forward, how do you think Democrats will shift their approach in the new Trump administration?
I think that now that everybody has had their opportunity to get their druthers, and we've seen what this new administration is going to bring, all the major appointments have been made. From what I am watching from operatives here on the ground in Washington, D.C., the opportunity really is wide open for Democrats to legislate or otherwise participate with the Trump administration on the executive side. And that's partially the nature of what we've seen from this administration over the last 4 years, and even going into now, is that they're going to be highly transactional. I'm seeing a whole lot of people who hung out at the Mar-a-Lagos of the world over the course of the last 10 years somehow showing up in D.C. I think that political economy and marketplace is open both on the legislative side as well as the business side. And I'm thinking that the Trump administration may surprise some Democrats as much as what they're willing to hear conversation about. We saw Donald Trump side with longshoremen since he's been elected. I just think there's a remarkable opportunity here to really get some substantive things done for the American people that provide a broader landscape of opportunity. I don't think there's a whole lot of progress to be made on a lot of the social issues that liberals have been concerned about, and rightfully so, because those have to do with fundamental protection of human rights. But I'm actually quite optimistic to see what the Trump administration presents in terms of having to work together with Democrats and broad structures nationally to actually achieve progress that's going to satisfy this populist coalition they put together to get elected.
Jonathan, does that extend, this highly transactional concept, will that extend also to Hakeem Jeffries? Is he going to be able to do it in this Congress?
I think it's extraordinarily important for Hakeem Jeffries, both for his own sake and for the sake of the Democrats in the House, to pick his battles, to understand where it is that President Trump is going too far, where President Trump may split the Republican Party and unify the Democrats along with some of the Republicans in order to stop parts of the agenda. I think if he decides to battle on everything, if he decides to try to maintain just a purely anti-Trump coalition, that is not enough, as evidenced by this last election, for Democrats to be successful. And Hakeem Jeffries is heading into his second Congress as the Democratic leader. He's still new in that job, still relatively new in that job, and he's got his predecessor, Nancy Pelosi, still around, still extraordinarily influential. Some would even say that that's still her caucus. So, as we saw with the effort to push out Joe Biden earlier this year. So, I think Jeffries I guess the point I would make is if he doesn't pick his battles, he won't be very successful.
What about air and reproductive rights, which continue to be a major issue? It moves voters and influence on all sides of the political spectrum. How do you think abortion and reproductive health will take shape in 2025?
Yeah, I think that that's going to continue to be a hugely important issue in 2025 as we continue to see this kind of shifting landscape day to day, in the courts, at state houses across the country. What does that landscape look like in 2025 at the state level? Will Republicans in Washington move to further restrict abortion? We've certainly got kind of mixed signals from President-elect Trump about what action he may or may not take on this issue. And with kind of these warring factions within the Republican Party, whether that's outside of government or in Congress, where people also, are duly elected and looking to flex their power, what action could we see even at the federal level on abortion, and how do states respond to that? How does the reproductive rights movement respond to this? I think that that's going to be really, really important to watch next year.
I think you're right, 100% right there. Matthew, Republicans, who do you think is going to start beginning to position themselves for 2028? Who do you see doing that?
Well, I think that's the big question. I'm going to be fascinated by the rollout of 2028 because both political parties are going to have to figure out who they are in two different ways, because the post-Trump Republican Party and the sort of the post-Biden, post-Hillary Clinton, post sort of longtime placeholders are going to have to figure out who they are in this America multicultural democracy in this. I think J.D. Vance, I think most people's odds that because he's close to Trump, he's the vice president, he'll have opportunity to separate himself. But I don't think I think that's only a minor, he's got a minor lead in that regard. I think what you're going to see on both sides of the aisle as we move through this, a lot depends on the economy, a lot depends on what Trump does, and if he does sort of scorch earth. But we're going to probably see 30 candidates between the two political parties running for president in 2028. It's going to be a circus in 2028 because both parties have to figure out post-Biden and post-Trump who they are.
Last question quickly to you, Dawn. Does that include Kamala Harris? What's your gut tell you? You were a big fan, a big supporter of hers through this campaign.
I'm not sure. I'm far more interested. God bless Kamala Harris. I think she's going to do whatever she wants and she'll have a wonderful life. But I'm far more interested to see the progress of some folks who are in high-level positions in their states and see how they develop over the next years. Specifically, Attorney General Aaron Ford in Nevada, who is let folks know that he wants to be the next governor of Nevada. I think he's a wonderful leader. I'm looking at Garland Gilchrist in the state of Michigan to see where he goes based upon what Gretchen Whitmer does. So I'm kind of looking beyond 2028 because I think that's 32 will be the first election where Democrats will have an opportunity to do something fundamentally different in how we approach running for the presidency. And the 4 or 5 folks who I see running right now aren't going to do something that much different.
Joining us now is Executive Director of the McCain Institute and former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia, Ukraine, and Eurasia, Evelyn Farkas. Evelyn, thank you for joining us. I want to ask you, not all this aid is out the door yet. Even even what's been approved still has to be administered to Ukraine. Is there a concern that that could get stopped with the next administration? And Ukrainian officials have already said they're scaling back some of their attacks because they're running low. How far will this aid really go?
Well, Christina, I think that there's no reason to be alarmed at the moment. In fact, the things that we've been seeing and hearing coming out of the Trump camp probably are a little bit more on the reassuring side. President Trump himself said something about any deal can't leave Ukraine alone, or his words were not exactly that precise. I think he understands that he needs Ukraine to keep the fight up in order to put pressure on Russia to come to the negotiating table and make a deal that all sides can agree to.
Right. That has been the issue. There has to be something to negotiate over. And American officials have said they need Ukraine to have enough territory, enough holdings to go to the table from a position of moderate strength. Trump has previously bragged that, he said he could end this conflict in 24 hours. But on Monday, Russia rejected some of the peace proposals that have been kind of floated by allies of President Trump. So I'm wondering how you see this playing out and if you expect the president-elect to back away from that claim as reality hits the road a bit.
Yeah, Christina, I think, this 24 hours, 48 hours, it's not realistic. Vladimir Putin needs to be convinced that President Trump is not on his side and is not going to offer him some sweet kind of deal. And that, frankly, President Putin, is going to have to accept the fact that any deal is going to include a security guarantee for Ukraine. And that's the part that they're resisting the most because, of course, the Russians want to continue the war, or at least continue it as long as it takes for them to conquer Ukraine and reduce it as an independent sovereign state.
As this war drags on, there's been big casualties on both sides, but, the estimates are hard to quantify, but the estimates for Russian casualties are anywhere between 10,000, 20,000, maybe up to 100,000. That's going to start to be felt at home, and it already seems to. There's reports out of Moscow this morning saying Russian people are losing enthusiasm for this so-called special military operation. At any point, do you see this conflict becoming a liability for Putin, or do you think he has enough of a handle on his population and his messaging that it won't matter?
Well, Christina, I think it's already a liability for him. Inflation in Russia is running at 10%. The interest rates, the bank announced, will stay at 21%. As you mentioned, manpower problem is pretty severe, so severe that Vladimir Putin accepted an offer from North Korea for tens of thousands of North Korean troops to fight on Russian territory. He doesn't have much leeway. This is not a popular war, and it's not going to get better for him. So I think he's already facing a lot of internal pressure, and he wants Trump in because he thinks that, time is not on his side the longer the war goes on. And that's why, of course, it's important for Ukraine to be able to continue to fight.
I also want to ask you about just that, these North Korean forces. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un praised Vladimir Putin and the ties between the two countries in his New Year's greeting. And that's coming from North Korean state media. But the U.S. has said Russia is basically deploying human waves of North Korean soldiers in the fight. What is North Korea getting out of or hoping to get out of this relationship? And are these soldiers having any impact on the trajectory of the war?
Right. Well, it doesn't seem like the soldiers are having a major impact. Most accounts say that the Russians have retaken some of the territory that the Ukrainians seized, obviously with the help of these North Koreans, but they have not taken it all. So the Ukrainians continue to hold on to a really important negotiating chip. For the North Koreans, what they hope to get is, I think, technology, a transfer, so know-how from the Russians in order to improve their ballistic missile, their satellite space capability across the board to be a bigger threat to the United States and our allies, frankly. That's what Kim Jong-un is hoping to get. It's unclear whether he's gotten anything like that from Putin yet, but that's the long game for him. And of course, as long as he can keep the people in North Korea in the dark about what's happening, and in terms of what's happening to the North Koreans who are dying in Russia, he can continue. But there will probably be a limit to that as well.